Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dr. Deepesh Paudel, who recently completed his PhD in management at Memorial University of Newfoundland. We are going to discuss his PhD research, which focuses on the interaction of theater and social enterprise. Deepesh, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dobson. It's a pleasure.
Deepesh, you founded Tatsama Arts in Nepal and spent years working on creative communication for societal issues like disaster management and health. How did those on the ground experiences in Nepal shape the scholarly questions you pursued during your PhD research in Canada?
Oh, thank you so much for the question, Dr. Dobson. It takes me back to, I think, 2012 when I first started theater. So, my schooling in theater, the type of theater that I did, or I was indoctrinated in a sense, was very much inspired by theater of the oppressed or street theater from people like Badal Sarkar, Auguste Bol. So the theater that I did always focused on raising political issues, awareness, social justice. So I always had an idea about the power of theater in society. And based on the audience or how theater is presented, I think theater has its own function, or people take different things out of theater. For some, it might just be entertainment. For others, it might be a tool to communicate, to create awareness about pressing social issues. And for some, it might just be an artistic and emotional expression, right? So I knew that theater had these niches and values that was tremendous to the society, but I didn't know that it would land me to a PhD. So when I came to Canada, relocated to St. John's, I always wanted to do something with the theater. And I saw that the lens of social enterprise, more specifically arts based social enterprise, was a sweet spot for me to pursue what I was passionate about and the pressing social issues, or the important issue of social value creation for the marginalized people of this province. So these two worlds came together, and then I happened to do this PhD in one of the organizations in Newfoundland and Labrador.
You mentioned the fun and challenges of conducting qualitative ethnography as someone relocating from the global south.
Mhm.
What was a cultural or academic clash you encountered when applying your theater background to a Canadian research landscape?
Oh, yeah. I'll just start with the fun fact because the fun fact was that I was able to. I'm like I always think of this as a privilege and a great and of a great fortune that I was able to pursue research in an area that I was very passionate about, where my heart is, which is theater and performing arts. So being able to do my research in an environment where I was acting, reviewing, watching the plays as an audience, or being involved as volunteers was something that I could have that's something that I would have idolized back home. Like it's a perfect theater environment for me, or a research environment. So that's the fun part. Challenges included many. The first challenge being the overall structure or arrangement in how theater runs in Canada vis-a-vis how it runs in Nepal. Because back home, where I grew up, or where I did my theater for almost 10 years before relocating to Canada, theater has been, and I think it's still very much led by the market forces. That means Nepali theaters, independent Nepali theaters, do not receive any support in terms of financial, institutional support from the government or the state. Unlike Canada, where donation, government funding, or other patrons' donation takes up a huge amount of the funding scheme, right? So
Mm.
trying to understand that system itself was a big overhaul that I had to go through, which luckily, with the help of few people, my supervisor, everyone around, I could get into that field and then understand how things worked very much quickly into my research. That's one part. And the other challenge was uh, being a person coming from the global south, doing a qualitative research, and I might be wrong about quantitative research, but that's my experience. Doing a qualitative research and especially ethnography, like I did, spent over 2.5 years with one theater organization, it takes up a lot of social capital from you as a researcher,
Mhm.
so that you could land into different research sites. You could try and understand the culture, blend with them, be the insiders, the word that is very famous in ethnography, where you become one of them, and then try to observe things in its natural setting. So, as someone coming from the global south, I didn't have the cultural understanding as much as I would have loved to have. I didn't have enough social capital to gain a lot of professional or personal networks. And even finding a research site and fixing myself in that research site, finding a method of working with them according to their schedule took some time. I was lucky. I ultimately ended up landing with a perfect organization, but these things in the initial days were a bit challenging.
Your research centers on bricolage, the art of making do with what is at hand. Do you view this primarily as a survival mechanism born of necessity or a deliberate creative choice that adds unique value to social enterprises?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I ponder about that a lot. So, bricolage, the theory that I took up on, is a French word coined by Claude Lévi-Strauss in the 1960s, which, like you said, refers to making do with whatever is at hand or readily available resources. So when you phrase that question from like the way that you did, I think it's a both. It's a bit of both, because in bricolage itself there is a conceptual understanding that bricolage can either be parallel bricolage or selective bricolage. So parallel bricolage is more of a practice of bricolage or a mindset of bricolage that comes from the survival mechanism. Like you apply bricolage or making do with on every field, like every front of your organization or your initiative. But as you grow and you get some understanding, or you develop your skills or develop your footholds, maybe in the market or in resources or somewhere else, you then slowly start to practice selective bricolage, which means you try to be you try to gain more resources on some ends, but then you still practice the art of bricolage on some other ends, right? So it's a bit of both, but from a theater point of view, definitely the presence of bricolage is a lot more.
Deepesh, you introduced the concept of ideational bricolage. Could you explain the concept of ideational bricolage and how recombining cultural or symbolic elements helps marginalized organizations break through market barriers?
Yeah. So, like I said, bricolage has been in the entrepreneurship domain since circa 2005, when Baker and Nelson published their seminal paper on bricolage. But the bricolage research, as it grew, mostly focused on material or resource-centric view of bricolage, like financial elements, assets, infrastructures, business acumen, professional networks, those kind of things, which are largely material-centric or resource-centric. But the ideational part of it, which refers to the intangible, the
Mm,
abstract, or the semiotic elements of bricolage, has been it has been overlooked over the years. So in my research, I tried to take upon ideational bricolage, whatever little has been explored about it, and then I developed a conceptual model about ideational bricolage, through which I define ideational bricolage as the process of making do with, celebrating, appreciating all the elements that are abstract, which are normative, cultural, and symbolic, in order to create social value, and in this context, for the marginalized people. So as I practiced through this conceptual model, I found out that many organizations, including the organization that I was researching on, they use a lot of institutional measures to create social value for their beneficiaries. For instance, the organization that I was researching on, Todos, it's Todos Productions, a theater enterprise in Newfoundland and Labrador. They they design their programs in such a way that it always helped actors, especially performing actors who are from the ESL background, like English as a second language, to use their identity, their cultural background, their skills, their vernaculars in order to create their own stories. It draws upon the lived experiences, right? So those abstract and then intangible aspects are drawn upon to create a social value which the beneficiaries experience in the terms of community engagement, social capital building, or even their subjective well-being of feeling good in the community. So using these abstract elements through the model of ideational bricolage, organizations can create social value that are then imparted to their beneficiaries or stakeholders.
Dipesh, regarding your buy of four model, how can social enterprises ensure that the value they co-create actually serves the community rather than being absorbed by the broader market?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and I right now I might not have a clear-cut answer for that, but I'll just try to address it because it's a question that I've raised or I've mentioned in my future directions because I think there is an important phenomenon we can study over there. So as of now, the model that I've created, buy off for model, it's an entrepreneurial ecosystem where all three nodes, like it's by the founder itself for using the employees or artists, local artists, and also the audiences of the communities, right? So it's in a kind of closed loop, which on all three nodes right now, most of them are people from the minority community or the visible minority or racialized immigrants to Newfoundland and Canada. So right now the creation has been flowing around the circle, right? And there we can see that there is value when it flows in that way. What I'm curious to understand, or maybe my future path would lead me, is what happens if one of those nodes is disheveled or if it's changed? Would there be any concern of appropriation of minority identities, cultures, if one of the nodes is replaced by someone belonging to the mainstream background or culture? What dynamics would that draw us into? I think that's something that my model has not yet answered, but a very potent avenue for future researchers and myself in the days to come. But thank you.
Mhm.
That's a great question.
I'm just wondering, could you share a real world example of what buy of four looks like in practice?
So I can share the example that that the organization that I studied doing here has been like adopting to. So buy or for in this case, buy refers to the founder. So in this case, Todos organization was founded by an immigrant from Mexico to Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, called Santiago Guzman. So he came up with this project or this initiative called Todos, which in Spanish means for all or everyone. Once he experienced a lot of direct, explicit, and implicit discrimination for people of color, visible minorities, racialized immigrants, newcomers, and refugees in the theater industry. So the roles that they would get would be a secondary role, maybe a side role, not the lead role. A lot of them would comment on their accent, English, and overlook the potential of their acting skills. So in that sense, the buy mode was created by a founder, right? And on the off mode, Todos deliberately tries to promote, support, and encourage and then incorporate people of these same minority backgrounds. So you can see a lot of people from different cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, different spectrum of the sexual orientation, gender orientation that come together and then create something out of it. So it's like buy and off, right? And for
Mhm.
also the audience, although the for node is a bit out of control of the organization because once the organization creates a product, it might not necessarily control who's or it might not be right to control who the end consumer would be, right? But a lot of people in the community, once they see their kind of stories on stage, they are encouraged to come and consume theater in the hall, right? So
Mm,
we've seen a rise of people from these minority backgrounds come as audience and consume the theater that tells their story in a place which might be not necessarily very close to their home country or their home culture, right? So
mm,
in this way, they've created a model where all different nodes of the entrepreneurial ecosystem has some identities from the visible minorities, which they proudly produce and then coalesce into social value.
mm.
I guess I answered your question.
Yeah, no, this is a great example that really highlights the human side of your research.
Yeah,
Uh, Dipesh, during your field work, you utilize an embedded participant ethnography
yeah.
acting in the very projects you were studying. How did you balance the emotional vulnerability of a performer with the analytical distance required of a management researcher?
Oh yeah, that's the first thing that I also think about this a lot, but the first thing that comes to my mind is, and I'm glad that it happened to me, was I was aware of what I was doing. Right at the outset of my research, I was aware that I had to wear or don two hats, right? As
Yeah.
an actor, as a researcher.
Mm,
So initially there was some technical difficulties in order to
mm,
separating myself as an actor or as a researcher because of the time that I wanted to take some notes immediately, but then I
mm,
had to do some other thing as well. So those were some logistical issues. But then I think my professional background, which was right now has been over 13, 14 years. When I started my research, I had already had 12 years of experience in theater. So being a professional actor in that sense helped me a lot because you get to be on like you know that you're playing a
mm,
part, you know that
mm,
you're professionally doing that. So that helped me a lot. The second thing is I try to be very neutral and descriptive while observing and writing my notes. So
mm,
I I never try to focus on the why question immediately, but I rather focus on what and how. Like what were the participants doing and how were they doing. I didn't assign any meaning to it immediately. I
mm,
just tried to be as descriptive. I did not go back to my field notes immediately. So I developed a separate memo where I
mm,
wrote my own feelings, how I interpreted things. So I tried to discern those two things differently. Then I also developed some good rapport with people who act as sounding boards, like in addition to my supervisor, who provided me much needed guidance on like where I am mixing things with my own feelings, or like is that something that I'm seeing it from a distant eyes. So these elements help me a lot on field. And on a very personal level, I try to practice mindfulness and meditation a lot. I'm
mm,
more interested into these secular mindfulness and meditation practices, which helps me be on top of my feelings a lot and be
mm,
aware of things that I'm doing at the moment. So
mm.
I think a mixture of all these things helped me cross the line somehow, like somewhat safely.
Yeah. Dipesh, your study involved verbatim theater with immigrants and refugees. How does the process of turning lived experiences into a dramatic narrative facilitate social transformation?
Yes, one part of my research was involved a certain verbatim project that Todos did. So in 2021, just to give you a background, in 2021, Todos interviewed, I think, over 2 dozen immigrants, refugees to Newfoundland and Labrador, and and interviewed about their experiences, how life has been in Newfoundland, what they missed, and everything. So then I took consent from those people who were interviewed, and they gave me the transcript. And later, Todos developed those interviews into a play called Newfoundlanded. So
Mm,
they developed that play, and in that play, I played. I was an actor for over 3 years. So it developed over 3 years. And what I understood from this whole process was lived experience is something that we all have with ourselves every time, right? It's
Mm,
very immediately accessible. And I think that's what the concept of bricolage was, right? Readily accessible input. So why are
yeah.
we only talking about materials, infrastructures? What about lived experience?
Mhm,
It's here. I can make do with, like, I do have lived experience with me right now. So the whole idea of this ideational bricolage tying up with lived experience led me to this process. And through which I got to know that developing this or dramatizing lived experience into a dramatic form helped amplify the voices, right? It amplified the voices because from a one-to-one interview, right now, the lines that those people spoke in their interviews were lines that actors were speaking out on stage. And the beauty of verbatim theater is that you cannot mingle with the lines. You have to stay
mhm,
with the actual lines, what they said. So if there's a grammatical error, you have to go with it, right? Because you're trying to be as true as to the basic script or the interview. So it helped amplify a lot of voices.
mm,
It helped celebrate, share their stories to a wider audience, right? And
mm,
especially audience which might not necessarily have gone through all the pains and hardships of the entire immigration process or being a refugee to a different country, right? So
mhm,
that's also one big aspect. And the final aspect is that it raised a lot of pertinent questions,
mm,
provoking questions, invoking thoughts
yeah.
that question the authorities and the systems, right? How system has been designed for racialized people or the new immigrants, and what difficulties are there in the system. So collectively, I think it helped raise the narratives of inclusion and made sure that people from all different margins are represented on stage.
Dipesh, what did being an actor allow you to see about the organizational structure of a theater troupe that a traditional management researchers might have missed?
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the first thing is that I think not only as an actor, but as an actor who participated in this embedded style, it helped me myself feel the phenomenon that my participants were going, right. That's the first thing. I think there's an element of autoethnography that you gain once you go through this process, because in a way you're yourself a subject of your own research, because you're also going through the same journey. You're spending time with them. You're spending months and months with the participants in the rehearsal room and everything. So, and being an actor, you know the professional demands and maybe the frustrations, maybe the joys, which maybe a management researcher coming from the outside might not be privy to.
Mm,
I'm just saying because of that particular thing. And also, most again, I want to reiterate this is that as performers like us who perform in as ESL, English as a second language, speaking in English is already difficult, but then like fluent English, but then acting in English is even more difficult because you need to understand the nuances, the slangs, the intonations, and then have a decent diction. So those kind of things, I think, um, the challenges of those performers can be felt if you go get under their skin. So as an
mm.
actor, I think I was also privy to those daily challenges that actors and theater artists coming from the other parts of the world face in this province.
Theater and the market are often seen as being at odds. Like theater is about art and the market about profit. So, how does your research suggest they could collaborate to solve developmental issues?
Yeah, although my research might not directly indicate anything, but I still do that. I still do think that there is an element where we can see that these two things are growing in silos. We talk about theater and we talk about market, and I usually sit in a lot of brainstorming rooms with theater practitioners, arts administrators, and I don't think these two have come together in a way that it needs to come. So for that, my understanding is that an interdisciplinary approach is on it has to be on priority, because it's something that not only theater people can do, but need a lot of skills from the business side of people, like how to develop a market, maybe talk about pricing, maybe identify a way to market the theater product itself. And in an age and time where digital bombardment has gone over
Mm,
the roof, I think maybe some of us in the marketing field might need to even position theater as a digital detox,
mm,
just to go out there, see people live in action rather than on screen or on your phones, and then feel the emotional exchange that transcends in a closed black box theater. And trust me, I can speak this from my own experience. The first play, if you land, if you watch a decent play for the first time in a black box theater, I think there's something that changes in you.
mm,
That happened to me, and I've heard a lot of people say that. So it has to come together, an
mm,
interdisciplinary approach, and then help theater gain that position in the market, which right now, it's drowning in the noise of all digital
mm.
chaos and cacophony.
Yeah. Dipesh, you have written about the risk associated with bricolage.
Mhm.
Based on your findings, when does making do stop being an innovative strength and start becoming a limitation for an arts-based organization?
Yeah, the main important finding that I figured out, especially for theater organization, is that, and it's a pitfall, is if a theater organization thinks that it has identified a template to create theater, and if it thinks that theater has to be done or needs to be done through this formulaic way, that is a trap. Because
Mm,
according to bricolage, you try to use whatever you have, right? So if as an theater organization you figure out a template that worked for you for the first time, and I think it applies to movies as well in general, or music or art of it. So if you think that you've identified a template, and if you start to recycle the template instead of reinventing it, then you're heading towards chaos, I guess, or danger, because you're just using. And I don't think art or creativity works that way. It has to always push the frontier, whatever frontier it's aiming at, it has to push that frontier forward or push the envelope. So, and take risk. So I think the contentment of thinking that you've found a template to produce a play or do theater in a certain way, or talk to an audience in a certain way, I think is the biggest danger of bricolage in theater. So you have to always reinvent, which again is a principle of bricolage itself. So it's a kind of a circular thing.
it's great. Dipesh, if you were advising a young artist or a social entrepreneur today, what is the one mechanism of theater they should apply to their business model to create a deeper sense of belongings for their stakeholders?
Um, I think creativity is one thing that can never go wrong. Again, it's a very subjective thing, creativity, but to me, it's trying to bring out the unique voice that you have in you rather than just following everything. There will be certain things that you might need to copy or mimic from other things, which is great. Like everything starts from somewhere, but it's the USP that you need to identify, which could be a small positioning statement, could be the way how you work with your team. And like in theater, there's no show that you can do single-handedly. Even a solo performance is a teamwork. So I think that's a biggest lesson that one can learn from theater. And also try and be emotionally open and embrace emotionality, and then present in your product, business, or anything which connects to the audience. If it's genuine, if it's
Mm,
not a facade, if it's genuine, it connects. Sell your story, tell your story, and then live with that story, and then like handheld your audience throughout the year. So I think
mm,
that can help. That's one thing that I would draw from theater that can be applied to various fields across management and business.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much. Dipesh, you have recently completed your PhD, so congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Dobson.
Now that you have reached this major milestone, what is next for you?
Oh, yeah, that's something that I need to start thinking. So, although I do not have any answers by now, but right now, but I think ideally I'd still like to pursue my academic line of work. I love researching. I love doing immersive kind of research. So one big plan that I have or a vision that I have is try to also contribute to the methodology because I think it's something that I have in me that's unique. Like I said, is being a professional theater practitioner and an academic thing. So and in a management or a social or entrepreneurial context. So maybe trying to combine these three things would land me or lead me to a sweet spot, which can contribute to the methodology as well as the social entrepreneur or other fields. So that's one plan that I have. The other one is I'm still open to other jobs or positions as well, maybe in theater policy making or like broad arts and culture policy. So right now I've not closed doors to any of those options. I'm just going with the flow and let's see where life leads me to.
Wonderful. Dipesh, thank you for sharing your journey and your research with us today. Your work reminds us that resourcefulness isn't just about what we lack, but about the creative potential in what we already have. We wish you very best in your postdoctoral journey.
Thank you, Dr. Dobson. It's a pleasure being on your show. I think what you're doing with this podcast is very important for aspiring academicians, researchers who are very early in their life and giving them a platform to share their researches and their life. So I thank you for this, and I hope you continue building on this podcast and reach out to many, many more lives. Thank you so much. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.